This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
On this Tuesday, January 17th, we welcome you to Real Talk. It's great to have you here. Ryan Jesperson, John Hicks, the technical producer of this show. In just a moment, we're going to check in with Athabasca University professor Dr. Paul Kellogg. Here's the cool thing. He's an expert on political economy, social movements. He can talk Canadian politics, which we will. Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe is miffed that the Prime Minister did not let him know that Trudeau was visiting a rare earth mining facility in Saskatchewan. The Premier didn't get the heads up that the PM was touching down. We'll talk about that dynamic. And of course, all of this a bigger conversation about Ottawa's relationship in particular with energy economies in the West and the just transition that everybody's talking about. We'll also ask Dr. Kellogg, who happens to be an expert in politics and history of Russia, what he makes of recent attacks targeting civilians in Ukrainian cities. This is something we talked about yesterday with Charles Adler. Obviously disturbing. Ashleigh Stewart's going to join us in just a little bit, an investigative journalist with global news. She's traveled all over the world, reporting from war zones and the like. Right now, she's blowing the doors off a story about a cabal of Canadian doctors that are actually fighting the fight against COVID-19, if you can believe it. And Ashleigh's done great work on it. Some of these docs have been coming at her, as a matter of fact, targeting her, questioning her credentials and her reputation. I mean, it's been character assassination is what it's been. Ashleigh's going to join us, and then Annalise Klingbeil will join us in the second half of the show. Johnny, did you know that tomorrow, I was listening to this yesterday, some of the details around this. Tomorrow, the Alberta government is set to launch its Danny Bucks portal.
Oh no!
Now they're not. No, I don't know. I mean, this is going to be big money. $900 million
that's good.
Is going to make its way out from government coffers to Alberta families that qualify.
Of course.
And everybody's wondering if the web portal is going to work, because that's how you sign up to see if you qualify to get your $100 a person per month for 4 months or whatever it works.
And that's
out
number one. Why I said, oh no. Number two is the memes of the Danny Bucks that I'm sure people are going to create.
Yeah. So of course everybody remembers in Alberta the Ralph Bucks. From whenever that was, like the late 1990s, something like that. I should have the details on that. And then, of course, there was the Moe money out of the province of Saskatchewan. Scott Moe hooking up, of course, residents in Saskatchewan with some of that province's surplus dollars. So Annalise, who did a great job, by the way, guest hosting on The Strategists, the episode of The Strategist this week. I'll ask her about that. She's going to join us in about a half an hour's time. Looking forward to all of that. These conversations happen because we have sponsors that believe in the value of Real Talk, and that includes the team at Apex Automation. You know, their main area of expertise is industrial control systems engineering and software development solutions for any industrial process, anything. So whether it's upstream oil extraction or pipelines across Western Canada or natural gas processing, or maybe in Saskatchewan, potash mining, robotics, material handling. They do a lot of that, like conveyor belts and overhead cranes. They're even working with craft brewers, automating that process. They're attracting the best professional engineers across the country, software engineers, experts in automation, in part because of the way that they value their team and how they're giving people back their time with intuitive, fully autonomous solutions to industry. If you're looking for a change of pace, you're a professional engineer, you know you bring value to the table. Why not check out the careers link today at apexautomation.ca. We're really excited that our friends at Park Power are back in for another year with the promo code SAVINGYOUMONEY, and this one, I think it's even better than the one we had in 2022. Why? Because it's a bundle package. So you go to parkpower.ca right now, you take a look at the rates that they're offering for electricity, natural gas, and internet, and when you sign up, you use the promo code REALTALK23. That's REALTALK23. For every one of the services you bundle, they're going to knock $50 off your first bill. So if you're all in, chips to the middle of the table with electricity, natural gas, and internet, the promo code REALTALK23 knocks $150 off your bill when you take your business to your friendly local utilities provider at parkpower.ca. And a huge shout out to our friends at Athabasca University. You know, they're presenting this next conversation. They believe that this is a perfect time for anybody to get going on a plan designed to fit your life. How can they say that with confidence? Well, Athabasca University is specifically designed for ambitious people across the country looking for more flexible approaches to higher education. Athabasca University is sure to have something that meets your needs, your ambition, and fits your lifestyle. You can get a Canadian education online with AU no matter where you live. It's a custom-designed approach to post-secondary education at athabascau.ca. Well, you probably saw it yesterday making news across the country. Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe says he was, quote, disappointed that he wasn't given the heads up. The Prime Minister was visiting the province of Saskatchewan. Says the Premier, it's disappointing. This is an area, says Moe, that the provincial and federal governments see eye to eye on. Yet we were not aware of the Prime Minister's visit to a rare earths element processing plant in Saskatoon. The Prime Minister then spoke with Saskatoon's Mayor Charlie Clark and reporters as well, but not the Premier of the province. Dr. Paul Kellogg is a professor at Athabasca University. He's been working there in the Masters of Arts program, Interdisciplinary Studies. He's an expert in Canadian and Russian politics, making his Real Talk debut this morning. Dr. Kellogg, thanks for making time for us. It's nice to see you here.
Nice to see you. Am I really an expert? I study very hard to try to figure out very complex problems, and if I can make a contribution, I'm happy.
Well, word on the street is that you do a good job of taking high-level and complex political and economic developments and translating them into speak that laypersons can understand. What's your initial response to Premier Moe's disappointment around the Prime Minister? This goes way deeper than just yesterday's visit.
You know, I think this is an opportunity for us to take seriously the question of civility in political discourse, because I'm kind of surprised that the Premier of Saskatchewan, I'm glad that the Premier of Saskatchewan wanted to be invited to the tour of vital metals. I'm a little surprised because it's almost on the 1 year ago, the Premier of Saskatchewan was backing the convoy protests in spite of the fact that we know about the Confederate flags and the swastikas and the profanity-laced stickers on the trucks saying a swear word about Trudeau. Given that, it's probably, in terms of when someone puts my name on a sticker and says profanity towards my name, I'm probably not going to invite them on the tour that's going to happen a year later. But I'm saying this a little bit tongue in cheek, because it's an important issue about vital metals and it's related to the whole just transition discussion. But I'm actually also quite serious. I think we have had a collapse of civil discourse in this country, and it is potentially catastrophic. And we have to find a way to have sharp differences about, things like the metals that are used in wind turbines and all the things that Vital Metals, as I understand, does, the rare earth processing that it does. We can have disagreements about that. We can have disagreements about vaccines, as what the convoy protest is about, and do it in such a way that we're not swearing at each other and drawing lines in the sand, because it's not helpful at all.
Well, and I would say, I take your comment seriously. You say you're saying it slightly in jest, but the fact of the matter is as well, and Premier Moe's not alone in this. If you listen to the prairie premiers, in particular, out of Alberta and Saskatchewan, the assertion has been, I was going to say over the last several years, I could probably say over the last 50 years, that Ottawa has been no help to Alberta. As a matter of fact, that Ottawa is actively trying to kill industry in Alberta. So maybe from a political strategy standpoint, it serves the Prime Minister better to do these news availabilities solo, as opposed to sharing the stage with somebody that's been asserting that he's been trying to kill the jobs in that jurisdiction.
I get that. This is a big discussion about the relationship between the government in Ottawa, the federal government, and the provinces. It's particularly in the West. This is a discourse that I became quite aware of when I emerged as a professor at Athabasca 15 years ago or so, and I became aware when I moved to Edmonton of the tension around the old national energy policy from the 1980s, etc. But there is a big truth here that we all need to confront, is that there is no way that any one of the provinces can go it alone economically. I know that there's the Alberta Sovereignty Act that Danielle Smith and the UCP have just promoted and talking about. It's a very probably unconstitutional document, etc. But it ignores the fact that Rachel Notley and Alison Redford in her brief term as premier was actually confronting this. She was saying, we are going to need to develop the economy of Alberta. We're going to need relations with the other provinces in order to simply to get the oil to tidewater for export and that kind of thing. And that can't be done by Alberta on itself, on its own. It cannot be done. So just simply on an economic basis, the notion of an autonomous province it's not true. It's not true for anybody. It's not true for Ontario. It's not true for British Columbia. It's not true for anybody. And that takes me back to the discourse question, because how do we have these discussions? I've seen we're segueing into a bit to another topic in terms of the just transition.
It's what we do.
The just transition has been angrily compared to the national energy program of the 1980s. I don't think that's a fair comparison at all. The NEP emerged as a complicated attempt at national governance, dealing with national economic development and how to best match up manufacturing and which was mostly based on Ontario. It's not entirely true anymore, with the natural resource rich provinces, particularly Alberta. Regardless of what we say about the pros and cons of the NEP, that's what it was. The just transition is on an entirely different level. It's about confronting the fact that we've got an industry or a series of industries that are finite. We all know that they're finite. There will not be oil sands in perpetuity as something to exploit in northern Alberta. There will not be asbestos in Quebec in perpetuity. There will not be all of the other riches that we have.
I mean, can we broaden the conversation to suggest or point out that with trends we see in fish populations, that the fishing industry may change, that we're probably going to be seeing changes in logging and the timber industry, like
huge,
aluminum,
huge.
like the list goes on. Everybody makes this conversation. I don't mean to step on your toes here, but everybody makes the conversation about oil and gas all the time, or specifically the oil sands all the time, because it's a group that you can target. It's a group that you cannot deny has been the economic engine of Canada, or one of the huge drivers, but it's also an easy target with regards to national discourse. But my understanding is that this is about a lot more than that. It's about, like you said, millions of Canadians that may see jobs or industries slowly hitting their horizon.
I'm old enough to have lived through some of these older transitions. I used to make my living as a typesetter. Typesetting, which is a term that people don't use anymore, because typesetting happens at the little Macintosh computers that we all have or whatever. And I remember when I saw my first Mac Plus back in the 1980s, I said, wow, my job is gone. And I had a good job. I was well paid. I was well compensated. I had benefits. I had security, because I could always, if I didn't like my boss, I could leave and get another job as a typesetter. We were in demand. We were not in demand anymore. But there was no discourse. The difference is there was no discourse back then about a just transition away from the old typesetting industry into, I had to figure it out on my own. And I think it's really good that we have a discussion about how to properly and in an equitable and fair way transition away from finite industries that we all know are finite. If we think that they're not finite, if we think that this can go on forever with cod or lumber, as you say, it's not just about oil, all the rest of them, then fine, then we don't need to talk about it. But really, does anyone really think that? We all know it's not true. And I think it's an important discussion that we have to have universally. And also one of the things that happens, this is not particular to Canada. there's a really, 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 really interesting discussion that emerged in the United Nations Development Program, I think it was, about the question of thinking of just transitions on a global scale, because it's not just Alberta, it's not just oil, it's everywhere. I think it's really important. I think, I noticed before your show started, you had this lovely ad for my university, for Athabasca. Thank you very much for that.
You got it.
And many of my students, maybe almost all of my students, are people who are thinking about their own individual transitions. They're thinking about, I've been working here for 20 years, not quite sure I want to stay at, maybe I want to upgrade inside my industry. Maybe I'm going to shift to another industry. Mostly adult students, really interesting life experiences, all as individuals looking at the things that we're all looking at. A very rapidly transforming economy, very rapidly transforming workplace situation. And we think about ways of how we can re-educate ourselves and change in order to adapt to that environment.
I understand that change is scary for some people. I understand that people that might not be, and again, I don't want to paint an entire industry or the thousands of workers in an industry with one brush. But if you have managed to convince yourself that the only threat to your industry is the federal politicians writing policy and not global markets and demand and trends and innovation and everything else, then I think you're really doing yourself a disservice. But again, I might be preaching to the choir on this one. Dr. Kellogg, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I remember when the pandemic hit full bore back in 2020, when the price of oil went negative for a period of time. It just, the price of oil collapsed as demand collapsed in the world system. That was so clearly something that was out of everyone's control. I think we need to focus on that moment and remember and draw the lessons from that. There are big global forces at work that shape everything that we do. They're hard to understand. They're very complex, but we've had a collapse of oil from the onset of the pandemic. And then we had a temporary spike in the price of oil because of the war, the tragic war in Ukraine, the criminal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which led to a spike in oil. These things are completely out of our control. They have impacts on our lives. They're out of our control. We have to know how to navigate them, not how to, and it's too easy to just point fingers. Analysis is much more difficult, but much more important.
Dr. Paul Kellogg, our guest from Athabasca University. Before I thank you for your time, I know your day is jam-packed. Really appreciate you making yourself available. You're also, you've got a ton of experience, your research in particular in the politics and history of Russia. And over this weekend, obviously appalling developments with an attack on civilian targets, including an apartment building in the city of Dnipro that claimed the lives of at least 30 people, including children. It's expected that death toll could grow. We're seeing the Russians deploy phosphorus bombs on populated neighborhoods. I mean, this is appalling. Yesterday, Sweden, obviously holding the presidency of the EU, characterized them as war crimes. Your comments, generally speaking, on these developments, the direction that this is going, and what you might expect to see from the international community in particular. I guess what I'm asking you is, what should Canadians be focusing on right now?
We should be focusing on humanitarian aid to Ukraine. We should be focusing on a call to cancel Ukraine's debt so that Ukraine can navigate this crisis. It is a terrible situation. It is, I am absolutely convinced that the only good outcome from this situation is a Ukrainian victory. If Russia wins, we're in a terrible situation. But there has to be a sober confrontation with our own history and the history of our alliances if we're going to do this. There's a very odd situation in the world where there are some, Vladimir Putin is widely seen in Canada and Western Europe rightly as a dictator, as an autocrat, as someone who is running an imperial operation trying to suppress Ukraine. There are many countries in Latin America, Caribbean, and Africa who are reluctant to take that step because it puts them in an alliance with the United States. And they have, in their own histories in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean, experienced exactly the same thing from the United States. The same kind of empire building, the same kind of suppression of national rights, whether it be in Guatemala or Ecuador or other places like that. So we have to confront our own history about colonialism and imperialism here while supporting and let me put it this way. Let's take advantage. Let's learn from the awful situation in Ukraine about the importance of supporting legitimate claims to self-determination and sovereignty. That's what the Ukrainian people are doing. They're saying we want to be sovereign. It's very simple. We want to be sovereign. We want to make our own decisions. Let's learn about that in terms of our own relations to, I don't know, in Canada, to the Indigenous populations whose sovereignty that we have actually held back for many years, or in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we have a very checkered history when it comes to some of the small countries down there. If we do that, then maybe we can learn something from this terrible situation. But in the first instance, my heart is with the Ukrainian people, and my heart and efforts are to help them in their terrible struggle.
I can hear it in your voice, and people that are watching this on YouTube can see it. Even your body language when we started talking about this, it's appalling, and and to a certain degree you feel helpless. But I know that that's not the angle or approach that people want to take, to simply throw up our arms and say, "Well, what are you going to do?"
And I'm kind of surprised at being here talking about Russia in the 21st century, because my research was about Russia in the 19th century and the early 20th century. But suddenly, this historical question has become a contemporary question, because we have to ask ourselves, where did this autocracy come from? Where did this empire come from? I've developed a handful of contacts with some people in Ukraine. I am learning a tremendous amount about empire and empire building in Ukraine, in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, in many other places in what was the Russian Empire, and that has reinforced my understanding of the need to confront empire building here as well. We have to get over this. We've partially gotten over it. There's no more formal sort of British Empire, but empire as a thought process and as a way of being economically is very much still with us, and it has to. We have to confront it. We have to deal with it here in Canada. If we do, then we'll have made a little bit of progress.
Such great insight. I'm grateful for your time, Dr. Paul Kellogg, professor at Athabasca University. We'll talk to you again sometime soon. Thanks for this.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
You bet. That's Dr. Paul Kellogg. You can learn more about Athabasca University and its programs by visiting athabascau.ca. Coming up in just a moment, Ashleigh Stewart joins us, investigative journalist with Global News. She is reporting on an absolutely remarkable story, but she's taking crossfire for it, and she's agreed to come on and talk about it. I hear about these transitions, these energy transitions. I've told you, I think, before. Well, as a matter of fact, I know I have the personal story of the founding CEO of Kubi Renewable Energy, Jake Kubicki. He's been on this show before. Long story short, journeyman electrician, working a great career in oil and gas, and saw the writing on the wall. This is not intended, if you work in oil and gas, to make you believe that we believe, or that anybody believes, that the industry is going to be phased out by Friday. But Jake saw opportunity in renewables and started small, and he's built his team up to the largest and most reputable solar installer in Western Canada. Kubi Energy is providing solar energy solutions to power your life in Alberta, British Columbia. They do big projects in Saskatchewan, commercial, industrial, and a ton of residential. If you want to check out what they can do and get details on that $40,000 interest-free loan, the Canada Greener Homes Grant, they'll do all the paperwork for you. It's never been easier, more affordable, or made more sense to get solar panels up on your roof. You can get a free quote today. Get the ball rolling at kubienergy.ca. We talk a lot about Friesen Brothers and the fresh food. All right, we talk about the fresh groceries. We talk about how it's locally sourced whenever possible. We talk about that grab-and-go stuff that Johnny and I love to pick up, whether it's the dill cream carrots or whether it's our favorite sandwich, some of those smash burgers or the pizzas. But what about houseplants? Johnny, there are a lot of health benefits to putting live plants in your living space.
Oh, I know.
In the workplace as well. What it does to the air quality in there. And, of course, just, generally the aesthetic. Did you know that Friesen Brothers has flower markets that they'll take your breath away. You can find out details on those and a whole lot more. Great resources on their website today, friesen.com. And if you're looking to make a life improvement in your living space, you're sick of being disorganized, you're sick of looking at the bare walls, maybe you need another bed, but you don't have room to throw down a big box spring. No matter what solution you're looking for, they can provide it at California Closets. Custom closets and storage solutions for your entire home, whether it's the kitchen, or whether it's your family living space like we did, stunning built-in cabinets. Maybe it's a total custom closet makeover. Maybe you're looking to put a Murphy bed down in the rec room or transform your garage. Nobody does it better than the experienced team behind the exquisite designs of California Closets. You can get a free consultation started today. That's what we did years ago. It has paid off in spades. We're thrilled with our California Closets. This next story is I don't know how to say it. It's stunning. Ashleigh Stewart, an investigative journalist, has blown the doors off a web of Canadian doctors that are undermining the fight against COVID-19. Just a few days ago, she updated the story at globalnews.ca. Ashleigh's originally from New Zealand, now working for Global News. Prior to moving to Canada, she lived in the Middle East, Japan, Indonesia, and she spent much of last year in Ukraine covering the war. She focuses on stories about mental health, marginalized communities, and disinformation, and we're thrilled she's able to make time for us today. As a matter of fact, it's her Real Talk debut. Ashleigh, thanks for making time for us, and a good morning to you.
Good morning to you as well. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thanks. I want to talk to you about this doctor's story. This is not just your average bit of reporting. The story's huge, and then there have been obviously some consequences, whatever you want to put it. Like you've had to put up with some BS, I guess is how I might put it candidly. But let me ask you first. I hope you don't mind talking about your time in Ukraine. We were just discussing with Dr. Paul Kellogg what's going on there. What an experience to be reporting from a war zone in a circumstance that is a situation that is still very much active. How do you wrap your mind with the professional and personal experiences you had around what you saw on the weekend?
I mean, it's very interesting. It's journalists are under attack on all fronts at the moment. So whether you're actually in a proper war zone or you're fielding death threats, abuse, just nonstop criticism, really. I mean, there are definitely parallels to both. It's kind of, you just got to have your defenses up and know what's right and wrong.
You've been an investigative journalist, obviously, for a long time. You've got a ton of experience reporting all around the world. Has the dynamic between the public and journalists demonstrably changed in the past couple of years? And if so, is it COVID, or is that oversimplifying it?
I think that there were problems before COVID, but COVID exacerbated them. And to be honest, I think that in Canada, which is strange to me, compared to everywhere I've lived, it's worse here. I think people feel like there is such an incredible freedom of speech in Canada. They can say whatever they want. They're empowered to say whatever they want. So they do. And that sometimes is a great thing, and people can be lovely, but sometimes it can be really bad. And the death threats, the abuse, the criticism that is not constructive does not bother me in the slightest, to be completely honest. It means I've hit a nerve. I'm doing my job. It's kind of water off a duck's back, but it's very easy for me to say this when I've conditioned myself as a journalist over so many years to be used to this kind of abuse. A lot of other journalists are not, and I just think that at the end of the day, it's not okay. Why are you sitting behind a keyboard sending death threats? Why are you, it's just unwarranted.
I know you're not saying this. I just want to say we never want to get to a point, and I think it's so important for us to push back, where we have to have journalists who are just doing their jobs, and obviously I'm biased, providing an incredibly important service, to say, I get used to it, or you get used to it. The last thing we want to do is to start normalizing this type of thing, especially for a young crop of journalists or the next generation of storytellers that are coming in that are taking a look at some of the blowback that you've received, some of the blowback that your colleagues have received, in particular, women and women of color across the industry, across the country and around the world. And these young people, these talented storytellers are going, am I going to really sign up for this?
For sure. And also social media has not made it any easier. I mean, in many ways, it's made our jobs easier because we have much easier access to people, like to news gathering and things like that. It's made our jobs easier, but it's also made it harder because we have to wade through the bullshit, as you said, to just be able to do our jobs. And you're completely right. It shouldn't be normalized, but it is, and it has been. And when you go into journalism school now, you're told you have to have a thick skin. You have to ignore it. You have to just kind of move forward. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So I have to say, the hatred and stuff like that over the weekend was far less than what I expected. I was very surprised at the amount of positive feedback that came from this story. And the small minority of trolls, let's be honest, it was trolls, were probably 5% out of 95% kind of positive feedback. So
I'm happy to hear it. And maybe the public's waking up about the power and importance of positive support. I don't know. Maybe that's my Pollyanna understanding of this, but I'm happy to see that people indicate that they've got these storytellers' backs because the stories are incredibly important. You know, we've spent a lot of time, Canadian media has, focusing on the fight between one prominent individual and an Ontario professional college. Of course, that's Dr. Jordan Peterson and the College of Psychologists of Ontario. You're reporting on another one. This is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario that have taken court action against at least 4 doctors. I know you'll update me if the story's changing, but can you bring us up to speed? These are essentially doctors that were allegedly writing false COVID-19 exemptions, vaccine exemptions for people based on false information or disinformation, right?
There's a huge range of the reasons that these doctors are facing disciplinary hearings. The most common is writing false vaccine exemptions and making inflammatory statements on social media about the vaccine and linking to studies that aren't necessarily peer-reviewed or just using false information to promote this idea that the vaccine kills people. And there are this small group of Canadian doctors who no longer have active licenses that are behind most of the disinformation that we're seeing, which comes through with this list that has been circulating for months and months about this list of dead Canadian doctors, 80 of whom supposedly died from the COVID vaccine. And this list is not hard to debunk. I mean, you can Google 10 of these names and find that they had long-standing battles with cancer. They had, some of them committed suicide, and it was completely unrelated to anything that was going on with COVID. I spoke to a lot of loved ones who say that their family members who died were so pro-vaccine, and they would be so upset to see their names being used in this way. It's just these are real people that lived and died. They're not just random caricatures on the internet, and their families are trying to grieve their losses and are now being sent hate mail about the vaccine, which they're like, what are you talking about? We have no idea what's going on because the death was not related to the vaccine. So it's just a really horrible cycle that we've got ourselves into. And then people are constantly believing it. Like more people and more people are coming around to thinking, oh, well, if it's newsprint, then it must be true.
Yeah.
Because this list has appeared in this fringe Canadian newspaper, and it's just snowballing.
We're talking to Ashleigh Stewart, investigative journalist, Global News. I want to refer people in particular to your Twitter account. It's one of my favorite follows at @Ash_Stewart_. Back on January 14th, just a few days ago, you tweeted about this big conspiracy theory, the one that asserts that this COVID vaccine could have killed more than 80 Canadians and Canadian doctors, rather. Obviously, you've spent a ton of time on this, months investigating and speaking with the doctors' families, as you just detailed. And then you provide some of the links and some of the information so people can educate themselves and better understand the story. predominantly, these doctors seem to be in BC and Ontario, though not limited to those provinces. We talk about the trust that people have, and even from the time that children are very young, we teach them that there are certain groups or people they can trust. I recognize that marginalized communities will have different takes on this. I recognize people with lived experience will have different takes on this, but we typically tell kids that you can trust the police, you can trust your teachers, you can trust your doctor. And so when these trusts are broken in any of those contexts, obviously we feel the magnitude of that. What sense do you get of what's motivating these doctors? Is this a concerted or combined effort? Are these renegades that just sort of happen to have been birds that have flocked together? Is it a big organization? I mean, the more that you've dug into this, what have you come to understand about the motivation behind this disinformation coming straight out of doctors' offices?
I think it's very difficult to ascertain what their motivation is, and I don't want to kind of make assumptions or anything like that, but it is very clear that a lot of them are feeding off this public adoration for what they're saying. They're feeding off the virality of the theories that they're posting. They are almost performance artists in some ways. I don't even know if they believe what they're saying or they're just feeding it to very persuasive minds. I believe most of them are linked. A lot of the doctors that are acting in this way all then appear in videos together and share videos together. A lot of them are being represented by the same lawyer. I do believe it's a concentrated effort. I think it's a concentrated effort to sow distrust in the public health sector, which is a really sad place to be in. At the end of the day, these doctors do have ethics to uphold, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. There's a lot of arguments that everyone should have the freedom to say whatever they want, but we're fighting a pandemic where there are ethics to uphold. There is truth and there is untruths.
Yeah. I'm wrestling with something right now between my ears because one of the doctors, and I almost want to do the finger quotes there, that has specifically targeted you and been a real pain in your ass, has been a pain in my ass for like 10 years. And I hate doing anything or saying anything that'll make him famous. But this guy is a conspiracy theorist. He's been defaming people for a long time, including journalists and politicians. He's a disgrace to his profession. He's been sanctioned before. There's been court action against him. I mean, the guy is an absolute gong show. But at the end of the day, people can take a look at professional credentials he has held in past or take a look at jobs he has held in past. And unfortunately, it implies that there's some credibility there. The real war that's being waged, I think, here, and you know it because you're on the front line, is keeping members of the public informed with credible information that they need to know. And that's obviously why this is such an issue, because you have people, medical professionals, that are actively countering public health messaging. And obviously the consequences of that can be very serious. Where do you see the conversation going? Are you optimistic that the average Canadian understands where to find reputable information and where to see the red flags when they're waving?
Well, I think this is the problem. I mean, you've nailed it on the head right there, is that people, as soon as they see the word doctor before someone's name, they automatically just think, right, well, that person is credible. I can listen to them. No one's going to spend time to Google anything. The pandemic has shown us that. Some random theory appears on the internet. People share it. They don't even think, they just click the share button on social media. And this is the issue. And I think I had a couple of comments come back to me after the story in the weekend saying, why are you even bothering? The anti-vaxxer group, whatever you want to call them, they're already set in their own ways. They're not going to listen to reason. And that's 100% true, but I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for rational minds who might see this and be easily persuaded to believe it. It is not for the anti-vaccine groups that already have their minds made up and will not listen to facts. It's for more people who will be persuaded to listen to it.
As mentioned, Ashleigh Stewart's reporting on this has extended. You're well beyond a year on this. I mean, I remember your reporting first wound up on my radar in like early January of 22. So really, this is something. Number one, can I just say I'm grateful that your outlet is giving you the opportunity and the assignment. I know it's a lot of heavy lifting to take that. What would you say, Ash? Like hundreds of hours of work that has to go into staying on top of a story like this. But because of your dogged reporting on it, through the winter months of last year, through the summer, and the abuse that you continue to take on it, we still have a better and we have a more fulsome understanding of how big and how serious this story is. It has implications with provincial health ministries. It has implications with professional colleges, obviously, and of course with members of the general public. And so thanks. I hope enough people say this. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you for saying that, because it does get, I mean, sometimes you just think, why am I bothering? Surely people know that this is not true, and I don't need to spend 100 hours or whatever it is, like drudging through the absolute cesspits that is Twitter these days. I mean, it's just, sometimes you look at it and it really does just give you such depressive thoughts about where society is going, especially because I say this in the article as well. The college is not holding these doctors to account. They say they can't. They say they need to be more empowered with policy options updated by the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health is not responding to anything. I mean, they're deflecting questions from me. I've asked for follow-ups from them over the last 48 hours. They've just completely ignored me. So the system is broken somewhere, and it's not going to get better until it's fixed. And I don't know what that fix is. I think the Ministry of Health needs to step in. I think this has to be the line in the sand. Things a year ago were just as bad, if not worse. They were just as bad a year ago, and they are getting worse now. And it's ridiculous when we're 3 years into a pandemic. How are we at this point?
And I know you're probably not looking to pick fights with professional colleges, but isn't it also interesting, Ashleigh, that you've got, on one hand, I referenced the other story, and people may say apples and oranges, but also not really, not 100%. The College of Psychologists of Ontario telling Dr. Jordan Peterson they'll strip him of his credentials unless he re-educates himself on social media. Obviously, he's not going to do it. Why would he? This is yet another license for him to print money. But the college isn't afraid to dig its heels in, and it's not backing down. Yet you've got the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario saying, well, what do you want us to do? When you've got medical doctors actively combating efforts to fight COVID-19 and the college is throwing up its hands? Wow, What a case study.
I mean, the college says that it's got something like 50 active cases against 30 physicians. Still, I mean, they are still dragging on. This has been 3 years into a pandemic. How are we at a place where 30 doctors in one province alone cannot be reprimanded or disciplined or whatever for their actions? And in the meantime, they're still continuing to promote these views everywhere. People on the internet are not going to know that they're under investigation for these false views. People are just listening to them and taking what they say as gospel, and it's sad. I mean, we are just at a complete standstill here, where people are allowed to say whatever they want, and there are no consequences.
You can follow Ashleigh Stewart on Twitter, on Instagram as well. And, of course, you can read her great reporting at globalnews.ca. Thanks for making time for us. Look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it. That's investigative journalist Ashleigh Stewart. And, of course, you know how it is. I'm looking forward to talking to Annalise Klingbeil. She's going to join us next. Obviously, she was a journalist for a long time and a masterful storyteller. She's got a Substack now you'll have to check out. I'll pick her brain on this, too. But, for a lot of people that would be whether it's vaccine hesitancy or whether it's questioning the science around the development of policy, public health policy, whether it's people that are buying into or believing these conspiracy theories about the more than 80 Canadian doctors that have died over the last year. I mean, the implications, obviously.
And all the other stories.
They died as a result of the COVID
athletes
vaccine.
Collapsing, reporters fainting.
Damar Hamlin.
These videos online, and then you go through them, and they're from all the footage is from 5 years ago, but people keep posting them. They don't even look into it.
So what about this one from Ashleigh? So Ashleigh, this is just again on January 14th, as I mentioned, about 5 days ago or whatever it was. And she says, for example, these are heartbreaking stories, right? Quote: Delaney Barth found her mother's body after she committed suicide. So she knows exactly how she died, i.e. not the vaccine. Delaney also believes the stress of anti-vaxxers asking for vaccine exemptions pushed her mother over the edge. Quote, for someone now to do this, to imply that her death was vaccine-related, it just feels so callous and cruel. When Ashleigh did reporting on she said of the 48 doctors, this is her reporting on January 14th, of the 48 doctors, these are deep dives for journalists to do. Think of the work that goes into this. Of the 48 doctors that Ashleigh could determine their cause of death, 10 died from cancer, 3 in car accidents, 1 while climbing K2, one of the world's highest peaks, 1 drowned, 5 had heart attacks, 6 died by suicide, tragically. Others battled either ongoing or abrupt illnesses, or the family preferred not to say. One of the doctors wasn't even vaccinated. It's hard to get killed by the vaccine when you're not vaccinated.
I mean, we saw this a week ago with CTV, Jessica Robb. She had an issue on air. She almost fainted.
This is a local reference. Yeah, CTV Edmonton reporter.
7 days ago. And immediately, the vaccine. And she, people now have to come out and say, hey, and she didn't divulge her private information, but she wants to, because people have to literally come out and say, no, it's a heart problem. It's my diet. I didn't get enough water that day. People have been fainting and passing away from different things for years. Now all of a sudden it's just the vaccine.
Yeah.
The vaccine.
By the way, shout out to Jessica Robb. I haven't talked about that publicly.
She's doing
I know she was trying to kind of keep that story out of the spotlight, but Naraman Issa, her anchor,
she had to come out
on the desk that night, deserved a lot of credit as well for how she handled a tough situation. I mean, we talked to Drex, a radio personality out of Vancouver, on this show a month ago. Mm-hmm. What's the guy, 42 or something? He's a young fella, mm-hmm. and had a heart attack, had a full-blown heart attack. And, the people coming at him suggesting it was because he was vaccinated. He's like, I got vaccinated 18 months ago. Eventually everybody who gets sorry, mm-hmm. I know that I'm, this audience, I don't think, we're all going to be nodding our heads probably. What a boring talk show where everybody agrees. But can we all agree that everybody who got vaccinated is going to die? Mm-hmm. We are all going to die. And if you die, 18 months or 180 months or 500 months after getting vaccinated, life will still catch up with you. There's not a whole lot you can do about that.
If you don't want to get a needle, that's fine. But we're talking about the most peer-reviewed, the most globally researched vaccine in the history of human history. So, I mean, I don't know. Yesterday I saw something about the metals inside it that'll kill you in 3 years. And it's we're going down. It's no man's land.
To be honest, I thought we were past this point.
I thought it was
at
the start was bad.
Past this point.
Like Ashleigh says, I feel like it's getting worse.
Yeah. Coming up, Annalise Klingbeil in just a quick second. These conversations happen because of sponsors like our friends at Local Environmental Services. Some people say it's only garbage. How often do you think about the big garbage bins behind your favorite mall or restaurant or retail location? Well, if you're running the business, you probably think about them all the time. I was talking to a pal the other day, Johnny. I gave him shit. Because he runs a business, and he was bitching about how much he's paying for garbage removal behind his business, and he's not with the Local Environmental Services. And I'm looking him in the eye. I almost shook him by the shoulders. Buddy! He's a regular real talker. I said, what are you waiting for? He said, all right, fine. I'm going to go to localenvironmental.ca and request a quote. And I said, yeah, like I've been telling you to do every single day, pal. You can almost guarantee they're going to save you money. They're family owned. When you call them on the phone, you get a real life human that picks it up. They'll even remember your business, maybe ask you about your family. It's all part of dealing with Local Environmental Services and keeping it local. You can learn more about it. Request a quote today. Alberta, Saskatchewan, localenvironmental.ca. Speaking of family-owned businesses, boy, are we ever proud to partner with the team at landscapeedmonton.ca. That's Eden Landscaping. Mike and his team have been working together more than 20 years, and, from modern to traditional design or everything in between. Their projects have one thing in common, that's happy clients. I said to Mike, what's the best compliment you could ever receive? He says, well, obviously it's a referral. But I said, how many customers have you had that have brought their business back, the return business? Folks that maybe hired you to landscape their starter home and then landscape their one-up home and then landscape the forever home. And he's smiling and nodding. Those relationships come over time. Those relationships happen when a company like Eden Landscaping earns your trust. They know this is an investment, but it's an investment in your future, in the enjoyment of your property, and of course, in the value and curb appeal of your home. If you want to get your project started in the spring, today's the perfect time to contact Eden Landscaping at landscapeedmonton.ca. Annalise Klingbeil is, she's a master storyteller herself, and we're going to get into some provincial politics with her. We're going to talk about getting out to the mountains. She's also done a lot of reporting on politics, and she's paid attention to the news cycle for many years. The co-founder of Champion Communications and PR, an Alberta-based communications and public affairs firm. She's got her Substack newsletter, Go Outside, and we're so grateful she's made time for the show this morning. It's nice to see your face. Thanks for joining us here on Real Talk.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah,
I got it. You've got some good sponsors. I got to talk to, I know you heard the strategist. I got to talk to Corey and Carter about upping their sponsorship.
You know, they come on here and they're masters. We have our Real Talk Roundtable presented by Urban Timber. And the last time that the strategists sat on our Real Talk Roundtable, the number of Urban Timber mentions that they made, I think, fulfilled our contractual obligations for about a year and a half. So it was great. I've actually been working really hard to get it. There's a certain airline that is often mentioned on the strategists, and I'm really trying to get our show actually sponsored by that airline so I can one up Stephen and Zane and Corey.
Oh yeah, that would be good.
I can't tell you, and this is I don't know if Zane Velji's going to hear us or not, because typically he's sitting in the host chair, and it's nothing against Zane, but you guest hosting The Strategist, the most recent episode that I heard, was masterful. You killed it. It was so much fun to listen to. Did you fancy yourself as hopping in on The Strategist before? You've been waiting, chomping at the bit to host that podcast?
No, it was, I got to be honest, and they're going to hate that I'm telling you this. I haven't listened for a while. I used to listen like way back, and then I had a baby like about a year ago, and my podcast taste like super changed. I was not listening to any political podcasts. I was not listening to my like regular crime podcast rotation. So when I got the last minute call from Carter last week saying, "Hey, do you want to host?" I said, "Sure, but I haven't listened." And he said, "That is no problem." So yeah, it was fun. They're fun. The feedback was that I held my own against them, which is hard, as you know. They've got a lot of opinions, but yeah, it was fun to kind of put that journalism hat back on and grill them and ask them some questions.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't just hold your own, you owned it, and I thought it was great. I would bring up a couple examples, but I don't want to spoil the listening experience for people, so they can download and check out the most recent episode of The Strategist. They've been great friends to this show and to this podcast, and I just thought you did a really masterful job. We were talking, and you were talking about the Danny Bucks, and this program launches tomorrow in the province of Alberta. It's supposed to, anyway, this online portal where the government is set to dole out about $900 million to Alberta families that qualify. It's drawing comparisons for obvious reasons to the Ralph Bucks several years ago, a couple of decades ago here in the province of Alberta, and more recently, Moe money, the Scott Moe payments in the province of Saskatchewan. Generally speaking, I know you keep your eye on politics and some of the factors that can prompt initiatives like this, and maybe some of the spin-off benefits for government, maybe some of the risks for government, and in particular this premier. Where's your head at as on the eve of this program?
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be interesting because we all know anytime a new portal, like anytime you got to go and sign on and log on, Twitter is just nuts. The text, the group chats about have you gotten on? My friends and I are like that whenever camping goes on. Obviously, this is a little bit different, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, they've built this portal. They say they spent a couple months on it, which is why the payments didn't happen. I think it was in November when this was announced. And it's interesting because they're kind of reinventing the wheel a little bit. Like, I think there are other mechanisms that they could have gotten this money out faster. So I certainly think tomorrow is going to be really interesting to see what that rollout is like, if there are tech issues, that sort of thing, for sure.
Are you preferring the vernacular Dani Dollars? I called it Danny Bucks in promoting your appearance on the show here today. What are you going with?
Dani Dollars has a better ring to it, but I mean, Ralph Bucks, anyone who was in Alberta in 2005, 2006, I think it's easy enough to get the two mixed up.
No, I agree with you. I'm a fan of alliteration and like things like Toastmasters and things like that. I think that they teach you that you can have effective messaging with. So we'll go Dani Dollars. How do the Dani Dollars, as far as we know, like acknowledging they haven't been doled out yet, acknowledging that it all starts on Wednesday, how does it differ in 2023 versus what we saw from Premier Ralph Klein back in 2006?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's a totally different time. And for any of your listeners who were here in 2006, you see that I think on the strategist, I said I was in junior high. When I went back and looked at the days, I was in high school in 2006. I think I was 16. I remember getting the money. My friends were all spending their $400 on fun stuff. And I had some injuries to my vehicle, and so mine went to car payments. And I actually talked my sister into giving me a little bit of hers because we shared a car, which was quite funny. But anyways, it just different time, right? The Ralph bucks, they were a prosperity bonus. The Dani Dollars are an affordability payment. 2005, 2006, 2007 in the province of Alberta, very different than now. We're almost 3 years into COVID. I think the timing is super different, and then the programs themselves are very different. I was reading back to kind of refresh on Ralph bucks. Every single Albertan got Ralph dollars except prisoners, is what I read. I'm not sure if anyone has looked into where prisoners fit into Dani Dollars.
It's because no one would stick up for prisoners, right?
Yeah, well, and think about it too, right? Like 17, 18 years ago, it was a different time, but everyone got it. And so I was under the age of 18. To the best of my memory, like all my friends, I think the money would have went in checks to our parents, but they gave us all the money. Like it was a prosperity bonus. You literally had, I don't know if you remember, but you had like retailers taking advantage of it, being hey, come spend your $400 here. You had ad campaigns. You had like hotels, getaway, like you were spending that money on fun stuff for the most part, and maybe a little bit of that was the age that I was. We were 16. $400 was a lot of money, but I think the general feeling, you can probably speak to it better than I, in Alberta, was like, cool, this is extra money, we can spend it on fun stuff.
You have officially, I think I'm going to put you not right at the top of the list, because I've heard some even more, some really compelling stories. And again, I know that we're having some fun here, and I don't mean to make light of this, but as a talk show host over the years, this has surfaced, and some people, you say, what did you spend your Ralph bucks on? And then someone will say, I was able to get my power turned back on, or we were able to heat our home, or the kids were able to have fresh produce. And you go, oof, like, that's, I think, an important reminder. And then, of course, that's relevant now, too, to the cost of living and inflation, the cost of groceries. And so I don't make light of that. But I would say you're right near the top of my list of people that made practical choices and practical decisions with their Ralph bucks. Mine, I vowed that I would pay as few other dollars into government coffers as possible, and so I invested in a radar detector. That's what I spent my Ralph bucks on, all $400 of it, on the sexiest, most tech radar detector. It plugged into the lighter. And Johnny, you weren't in Alberta. You were just a young gaffer in Ontario at that point. I think, right?
I didn't get to experience the Ralph bucks.
You didn't get your
$400. But I'm just
$400.
laughing because you and the radar detector.
It's a good personality test for people.
It is.
Were you in Alberta at that time? People, I think, of a certain age, right? I think obviously parents, you spend it on diapers, formula, whatever, but people of a certain age who were doing well in 2005, 2006, or I was working a minimum wage job at the mall and saving up. My car repairs were like $600, and that was a lot of money on my minimum wage salary. So here's what my $400 went to, and then my sister, her sister, kicked in $200. But I think to speak to the present day, it's a totally different time, right? We've had COVID. We're entering into almost 3 years of that. A lot of people are struggling. You have inflation. You have a government that I would argue has made a lot of things more expensive than it was 3-4 years ago. And then she's introducing this program that leaves out almost 2 million Albertans. So it's a totally different program. I think the money, this is a near $1 billion program. So the actual cost is similar, but they're two very different programs. And with this one, I guess for listeners who aren't aware, the eligibility, I think, is combined household income of $180,000.
Right.
And then it's seniors that get it and it's parents that get it. Like, you have to have a child under the age of 18. So if it's 2023 and you're a single person and you're making minimum wage, you don't get this money. And I think that's a problem. It leaves out a lot of people. And I think fundamentally it's very different than Ralph Black's. And we can argue, I would argue both are vote buying schemes. But in this case, you're leaving a lot of people out. And I think this government is going after people who they need votes from, their seniors and their parents.
Yeah, I mean, re-indexing AISH is a storyline that's significant, but it's flying under the radar a little bit. I know that the government will be mentioning it a ton in the next little bit. And you're absolutely right. Just because, people will say, well, listen, don't underestimate the value of these payments, because a lot of people are really struggling right now. And that is true. And that is a fact. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a vote buying scheme, right? I'm not going to say that people can't use the money, but also, I can't ignore comments. Like, we've got one in our live chat right now, for example. Well, I mean, we've got a ton in there. But Justin, for example, watching us on YouTube, says, not to mention the sheer waste that this program is. You want to make things more affordable. Why not invest the surplus into education or healthcare, or cap those damn insurance rates? I mean, these are all things that have changed, in insurance in particular, under the previous premier, that have made a big difference in people's bottom line, and not in a good way. And so you have to wonder if this is damage control 5 months out from an election.
Well, and the other big difference is the Ralph bucks were mailed out. You got a $400 check. This is $100 per month. And we talked about this on The Strategist. Corey and I had a different opinion than Carter, but as the communications person, like, the bigger number is flashier. So people getting that $600 is different than that $100 per month, which they literally are going to get in April. In May. Oh, what happens in May? An election. And then it ends in June. I think the timing and the way we're doing it, $100 per month. And one could argue, okay, I get that $100. This month is going to go to this thing that the UCP has made more expensive. This month is going to go to my insurance. I just think it's hard to square that you have a government that has made a lot more expensive, and then they're like, here's $100 to a select group of people. You're leaving out 2 million Albertans. And I think the other thing, just in researching this, that I don't know if you remember this, I did not remember this because I don't think I read it, but when Ralph bucks were mailed out, they came with a letter. Do you remember this?
I vaguely remember.
Yeah, so the letter, it said, I'll read it to you here. Dear Albertan, enclosed is your Alberta 2005 resource rebate. This $400 per person rebate is being provided by the government of Alberta as a non-taxable one-time bonus to all Albertans in recognition of their role in building this province. Congratulations and thank you for helping build this province. Right? So even the tone of that, it's like, hey, here's $400. Thanks for building this province, is a very different feel than, hey, everything costs more expensive. Anyone who has to buy groceries knows that. Anyone who puts gas in their car knows that. Anyone who pays car insurance knows that. Anyone who has kids in school paying school fees knows that. And here's $100 to some of you if you're a senior and if you have a child.
It is risky. I would love to be a fly on the wall in the premier's office, and these policy decisions are happening when they're cooking up the plan. To do something like this, and then to say, because on one hand, Annalise, it's obviously, to state the obvious, more expensive to pay everybody off, or to pay everybody out, or to share some of this surplus with Albertans. More expensive, yes, but once you start pigeonholing it or picking and choosing who's going to qualify. I mean, even $180,000 is a household income. Here's where I walk out onto thin ice, but depending on people's circumstances, for some people, 180 grand is like all the money in the world. They'd be perfectly fine. And for a lot of other people that are making 185,000 as a combined family income, they're going to be paycheck to paycheck. And obviously we can have a ton of different conversations about that. Seniors, what about somebody that's 10 years shy of 65 but has health issues, but they don't qualify for AISH? What about somebody that's been laid off? What about somebody that has incurred family expenses? A hot water tank goes out and then the roof starts leaking or whatever. The point is, once you start picking and choosing who's getting the money, I think that you take political risks as well. And no matter how much you intended to have positive messaging around a program, you could still end up getting really nailed to the floor by some of the things that the public might have to say about it in criticism.
Yeah, I mean, those backroom conversations would have been super interesting because you could argue, instead of this $600 for this segment, like what if we did 300 to everyone or whatever. I do think it would have been very interesting to be a fly on the wall in the decision of who gets this money, because that conversation was not happening in 2005, 2006 with Ralph Bucks. They went to every single Albertan except prisoners.
Yeah, let me ask you, I forgot about the no prisoners thing, but I guess that's kind of the point you're making, is that nobody was really talking about them. I think that would be probably different now. In 06, they're mailed out. One lump sum, $400 for everybody. Saskatchewan, as far as I remember, you can remind me, I'm sure, mail, I think you just had to make sure that you filed your taxes, because some people were embarrassing themselves inadvertently, being like, I didn't get my check, and then people would always respond to them on Twitter, like, maybe you should file your taxes. This new online portal, you talked about it on The Strategist. Revenue Canada, I'm sure, could have handled it. The government of Alberta wanted to build its own. There's a lot of storylines that could spin off of that. It's an opt-in as opposed to an opt-out, which leads me to believe that some people may leave the money on the table, so to speak, without even realizing it. And then, of course, there's the potential for scams, right?
Yeah, and the scam one is, this one wasn't even on my radar. And then I saw a tweet yesterday about someone who had already gotten a text. It was a screenshot of the text that said, like, hey, you click this link and you'll get your $600 payment. And they tweeted it being like, I know I don't qualify, so I know that this is not for me, like this is a scam. But how many people are gonna be clicking that? And then Carter brought up, and people can listen to the podcast, but Carter brought up like seniors and people, and when he was bringing up his mother-in-law.
His mother-in-law.
Yeah, poor Ruth. I did not defend Ruth the way I should have. I was told after, but I was thinking of my own granny, right? Who's in long-term care. She doesn't have a computer. So how, I was actually talking to my parents yesterday, how are we going to sort that out? But I think this whole opt-in nature, you're going to have a lot of people who don't realize, or you're going to have, that mom with several kids who's working a few different jobs who doesn't have the time to do, like, you're just missing people. And I don't understand why they wouldn't just send out checks. And Saskatchewan, I think it was last year, they did their $500 affordability checks. And my understanding is those automatically went, if you were over 18 and you'd file taxes, you got it in the mail. So why not do that? I know the UCP has said, the Canada Revenue Agency, their platform would delay the payments. But that being said, they've also said they're going to use CRA data to verify like if you're eligible or not. So again, is this just like this government can't cooperate and do anything with the feds, and that's what this is about? So just back full circle to the first point we were talking about, it's going to be really interesting on Wednesday to see how this portal that they've spent a couple months building, how the rollout of that goes. I
can't say, I can only speculate, but I have to assume that though it might be easier to do it through CRA and existing infrastructure, that's got to be exactly what it is. Like actually the irony of Ottawa administering an Alberta-made initiative for Albertans in a positive way. In other words, the CRA is depositing money into your bank account as opposed to the GOA. I bet you that has to factor in, don't you think? I mean, it does.
I think for sure. But this is where, and I would love to know how much this is costing. I don't know if journalists have asked. I don't know if they're filing forms. But how much is it costing to build this maybe it's existing software, I don't know, but they say they've been spending a couple months fine tuning it. How much are we spending on like this made in Alberta solution? And is that money that could have gone to the people that need it, like that minimum wage worker who doesn't have kids, who does not qualify for this payment?
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm so grateful for your time. We're talking to Annalise Klingbeil. If you're just tuning in, maybe live streaming on the Mixlr audio app presented by California Closets, I hope that people already know about your Substack. It's fantastic. Gooutside.substack.com. I already sent your article back on January 10th, when to book your 2023 camping trips. I sent that to our WhatsApp group chat, the Outdoorsman Social Club, and we've been using your great information to help plan out our getaway for this upcoming summer. And I love the piece you've just posted. Moraine Lake Road closure highlights Park Canada's difficult balancing act. People can read it themselves at gooutside.substack.com. Of course, this just a short time ago, Parks Canada making the announcement. Actually, I think it was maybe Banff National Park that made the announcement in particular, but due to safety concerns, they say negative experiences caused by 24-hour demand for parking. In particular, I even saw the grizzly bears referenced on this. Personal vehicles won't be allowed on Moraine Lake Road in summer 2023. Much ado about nothing, a big deal. What's your take on this story?
I think it's interesting, and I expanded on in Go Outside today. There's so many different threads here. At the end of the day, it's a long time coming. Anyone who's been to Moraine Lake recently, I think, knew that this needed to happen. Anyone who's paid attention to like the park management plan stuff in Banff knows that changes are going to happen. The park is too popular, it's too busy, and it's a national park, right? So you can't build more parking lots there, as some have suggested. So I mean, there was a lot of people that are upset about it. There was also a lot of people that were applauding it. And I think people who spend a lot of time outside see that this needs to happen. It was interesting because I did interviews last week. I had just kind of shared some opinions on Twitter. I was going to stay quiet. And then the provincial parks minister said some stuff that I really disagreed with. I was yelling on my radio when I heard him on there. So I turned to Twitter and shared some opinions. And then that led, so I did an interview with The Guardian last week, as well as the Toronto Star. And I think from this like national media perspective, people are looking at it like, what is happening here? This is crazy. But this battle between like conservation and tourism in Banff National Park, it's been happening for decades and decades and decades, right? Yeah. The park was literally created for tourism, but you need those like natural spaces in order to have tourists come there. So tons of different threads here. One thing that I think is quite interesting here is just like if how we go outside in our national parks, specifically our popular national parks, does that need a rethink? Do we need to do it differently? And I pointed this out on Twitter, and it's in the Go Outside Substack. If you search Moraine Lake on Instagram, it's like thousands, tens of thousands of geotag pictures that are the exact same picture. And I'm not saying like that's the only reason why Moraine Lake is popular, but what role does social media and geotagging specifically play in driving this like people to the exact same spot for the exact same photo? You know, Banff is huge. It's like almost 7,000 square kilometers of and most of that is wilderness. 96% of that is wilderness. And so it's, you know, there's a lot of other places to go. And a big reason my sister and I started Go Outside a couple of years ago was exactly for that reason, to urge people to go outside and to go to places that are not like that super popular place. It doesn't even feel like a park. I don't know, Ryan, if you've been to Moraine Lake recently, but it's a totally different experience than when you go like hiking in Jasper. It's
not my thing, to be honest, and it's beautiful, and it's not a slight against Banff or Moraine Lake or anything like that. But I'm not a, like, put it this way, you know, like Annalise, when we hiked the Inca Trail over 6 wonderful days up to Machu Picchu, and the spiritual experience of it all, and the physical challenge of it all, and then all these tour buses just like rolled in and people spilled out and got their Machu Picchu photos. It really chapped my ass, to be honest. And so I'm not a huge fan of that type of thing. That said, I'm also a big fan of having people experience the national parks and the views and this part of the world, and of course the employment that comes with this, and all those types of things. And so, of course, there is that delicate balance. I'll let people know that we have the Federal Tourism Minister, Randy Boissonnault, joining us on tomorrow's show, and obviously we'll be talking about this. Annalise, for people that didn't see your tweets, they can follow you, Annalise AK, and of course the links to your Substack will be in the show notes here on YouTube and on our podcast. What was it in particular about Alberta's Parks Minister Todd Loewen, his commentary about this story that you didn't especially appreciate?
Well, you can't build a bigger parking lot in a national park. Like, you just can't. I'm no environment minister, but you can't. It's a national park. Let alone if you've been to that area, like, there's no space.
Have we considered a parkade?
There's no space for a bigger parking lot. So that was what really, like, it sounded like he did not know the file, which bothered me. But I think the big thing, and this I actually kind of forgot, I was so ragey about it that it took like a minute. I was like, oh, this is the same government that wanted to close all of those parks, right? So you have this provincial minister who's saying, like a parks minister saying, it's controversial anytime we make changes to parks, and Albertans love going outside and all this, from the same government that it would have been 2020. It was right before COVID. So almost 3 years ago, it was like February 2020. The government said, quietly on a weekend, hey everyone, we're going to close these visitor centers, we're going to close these underused parks, we're going to put 160 parks up for partnership, we're going to shorten the camping season, we're going to stop cross-country ski trail maintenance, like proposed.
Don't forget the Kananaskis pass too.
Yeah,
I mean, charging people, right?
Right. And so they were going to make all these changes to parks. People will still see, I don't know in Edmonton, but in Calgary, there's still the Save Alberta Parks lawn signs, huge campaign, tons of people against it. You had your core blend, like, et cetera, reverse those changes, then introduce now it costs you $95 to go to Kananaskis, one park, but not the others. Like, it's just, you have this government that has made huge changes to parks, some of which were stopped, thankfully, because Albertans spoke up, because Albertans love their wild spaces. But it just seems hypocritical for that government to then say, oh, we're really upset about this one road closure. And if anything, if Parks Canada rolls out this shuttle program, so just to be clear, the road up to Moraine Lake is being closed to private vehicles, but there will be shuttles. And I think if that is rolled out well, a lot more people are going to be able to go to Moraine Lake. Right now, they're saying last summer, 5,000 vehicles a day were being turned away. Only about 900 were making it through, and that parking lot fits 100 cars. So that's insane, like 5,000 vehicles wild. A day. They come up, if someone has to tell them you can't come here, they turn around. I read one thing where it was like, the abuse that the people saying sorry we're closed face, like, it's just nuts.
I mean, you come here from Frankfurt or Tokyo, and you're set on seeing Moraine Lake, and you don't know about all the other lakes. I'm going to ask you to in just a second to tell us about your second most favorite lake in the area, because obviously you're not going to tell us your first. I'm not going to tell anybody my first, but we can do our second favorite and make those recommendations. You understand why people might be a little bit perturbed, and then of course the cynic in me is also like, well, boy, this sure works out well for Brewster or for any of the other companies that run shuttles in the area, Sundog or the others, but also, like, that's part of it. And that's part of doing business, and that employs drivers and dispatchers and mechanics, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we know that bus transit's better than a whole bunch of cars, and so there are trade-offs for sure. I think the best solution here is reminding people that there are, like, no slight against Moraine. I don't think Moraine Lake's listening this morning, but, like, there are cooler places. What's your second favorite lake in the area that people should hike into or go check out?
It's a good question. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell people, go to Lake Louise as second. I think Lake Louise is also very busy. It's super beautiful. But, like, I don't necessarily think it's our second favorite place we should be driving people to. It's the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, right? And so maybe that's like a future edition of Go Outside, of here are the 10 beautiful lakes near Moraine Lake that you should also go. But I do think that falls on Parks Canada a bit, of like, let's stop driving people to the one same place for the same photos. Let's go to other places and not just one other place, you know, spread those people out and make it really easy of like, this is a really short hike. This is a little bit longer. This is if you're a little bit more comfortable. Here's what you need to pack. Have those trail markings. Like a big reason people go to Moraine and do the little like less than 1 kilometer hike to the viewpoint is because it's easy and it's well marked and they feel safe. And so if that's someone's first introduction to nature, that's wonderful. That's the first step. Then they're comfortable. And then the next time they do a 2 kilometer hike or they do a 3 kilometer hike, right? So I think a big reason we started Go Outside, we're all about like the outdoors should be accessible and people should be going there, and you start with those easy ones and then you do harder and harder. But I think there's a communications thing here where you need to tell people where to go because they don't know. And that's where they go to their Instagram and they see, oh my God, 200,000 people have tagged this space. Look at the pictures. It's beautiful. Okay, that's where I'm going.
Totally. 100%. All right. I'll throw a couple bones out there. It's 7K in, switchbacks. Taylor Lake's great. Yeah. People can enjoy that just outside Banff. I think that the hike into Skokie is phenomenal, and Merlin Lake in that neck of the woods, so to speak, is well worth the journey. We had one of our most memorable backcountry hikes of all time into Merlin Lake in the Skokie area. And then, of course, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. Sorry. No, I'm not going to do it.
For those listening, I was second Merlin Lake. It's magical. If you go swimming in there, it's like, it is magical. And there's no one else there.
There's nobody there. And it'll blow your mind. And if you're into like psilocybins and psychedelics, it's even cooler. We got a light show out there, Annalise. I'm never going to forget it for the rest of my life. We saw bears out there. It was like in a good way. It was absolutely stunning. And there's nothing like having like imagine being able to take your new Instagram shot or your new Facebook profile shot on a wide angle, and there's not another human in it, in the frame. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I'm excited, by the way, on a side note, to read the results of your hike. You got a hike coming up, unless it's already happened, with the former Calgary City Councillor, former candidate. A lot of people thought Jeremy Farkas was going to be the mayor of Calgary. He did like the Pacific Coast Trail, Pacific Crest Trail. What's the one that's like 1,000 kilometers or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think it's Pacific.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Coast or Crest.
He did, long one. But he did like a fundraiser for I know I should have more details off the top of my head, but like a number of months after the election loss to ostensibly clear his head and figure out his plan moving forward and get his priorities straight. And you're going to be hitting the mountains with him and interviewing him along the way.
Yeah, we're going to do a hiking interview this week is the plan. And it's funny. So I used to cover City Hall at the Calgary Herald. So I know Farkas from when he was a new councillor. So my plan was kind of to go and have like a pretty, I'm not going to say grill him, but like, have some honest conversation about that time on council and running for mayor and what he's doing now and if it's just a big publicity stunt. And then my sister reminded me we are an outdoor publication, so I also need to ask him outdoor questions. So I don't know, to be determined how we're going to write it, because I think there's some very interesting, like for those civic nerds, there's some interesting elements. And then for those people who are interested in the fact that he's a big hiker and he's doing these 25 winter hikes in a row. So yeah, it should be, I'm looking forward to it. It should be a good one.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. And I should correct myself here to do what he did justice. It was a 4,280 kilometer hike. How wild is that? The Pacific Crest Trail to fundraise for Big Brothers Big Sisters. That was Jeremy Farkas. Stephanie Babich reporting that when he was done at the end of August, so a number of months ago. You can read the amazing work that Annalise does on her Substack and encourage you to subscribe to it. It's well worth it. Gooutside.substack.com. We're a big fan of independent storytelling here, and you do it masterfully. Thanks for making time for us on the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
You got it. That's Annalise Klingbeil. Again, gooutside.substack.com. You can follow her on Twitter at AnnaliseAK. And check out, download and listen to the most recent episode of The Strategist. She does a great job sitting in for Zane Velji in the host chair and cracking the whip on Carter a couple times. If you like The Strategist, you'll know exactly why we enjoyed that so very much. That was Annalise. That conversation was presented by our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. This January, for the entire month, they're offering a buy one, get one free special for Real Talkers, a 6-pack of dilly bars, dairy-free dilly bars, or the Dairy Queen sandwiches, the world-famous DQ sandwiches. Buy one, get one free. You buy 6, you're going to walk out with 12 if you mention Real Talk. And if you're like Johnny Infamous, if you're visiting the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, or Baseline Road on a regular basis, you can feel the allure of these frozen treats to the point where I see you on Kijiji shopping for freezers. I see you looking to upgrade your freezer game, John.
I got to. I mean, I'm packed to the brim with dilly bars right now. I'm trying to stock up for the year, Ryan.
Yeah, there you go. It's the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. We love whether you're at the counter or at the drive-thru. You let our friends in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, Sherwood Park know that you're there because you heard about them on Real Talk. What do you make of that story? I know that it was announced a while ago, but Banff National Park closing vehicular traffic Moraine Lake Road. You cool with it?
I think it's like she said, it's a conundrum. Like, you want people to get out in nature because then they'll appreciate, respect, and want to conserve it and maybe donate and just treat it with respect. But then it gets overrun with people. And then, I mean, there's not trash everywhere, but you know what happens? The trails get run down, and it's a fight between conserving and tourism, right? Which is why it's there. We want to enjoy it. But
I'm seeing some suggestions here. Plain Power's recommending people visit Johnston Canyon. That's like my childhood memories are there.
I think that's the good idea.
It's an accessible hike. It's a stunning. We've got tons. We have My Jasper Memories coming up tomorrow, and we'll talk to you about that neck of the woods in Jasper National Park. I think of like Moraine Lake. I think of the Moraine Canyon ice walks and some of the cool stuff, west of Hinton and Jasper National Park. We're talking Banff National Park right now. Johnston Canyon obviously is phenomenal. The ink pots. There's a ton of the natural bridge. I mean, anybody that's been around and spent some time in that area will know. And I appreciate some of the other points that people are making here. Artie Miss says, for example, it depends on what people want to do. Like if you want to debate, whether or not bus travel, shuttle travel, road access, says, not everybody's a hiker, which is also true.
I get that.
Like, we need to be reminded.
But if you're able, take the roads less traveled, the ones we were talking about. Don't just go to the Instagram spots, because there is going to be a lot of people there, and they're going to get trampled, and they're going to become less beautiful. Shouts
out to Lake Minnewanka, Emerald Lake, Peyto Lake. But Peyto Lake is another one where it's just been, it's almost, I hate to say this, but it's almost cliche. Like, you look at how much action there is there and how often, the more you see a destination, like, talk to anglers about this, talk to people that love to fish. The more you see a lake on social media, the less you want to go there. Right? The best lakes, it's why I'm not going to say my number one. The best lakes are the ones where nobody's there polluting it. You know what I'm saying? Every Tuesday here on the show, we celebrate innovation. Why? Because our friends, our sponsors at Leading Edge Physiotherapy value innovation above all else. If that's in the specific areas of health and wellness or more, what we see around us. The people that innovate, that push the envelope, that don't take the challenge as an acceptable answer. Well, those, of course, are the ones that are driving us forward. We call this feature The Leading Edge, presented by Leading Edge Physiotherapy. And today, we're excited to tell you about a new development. Researchers, this has just been reported last week out of the University of Cambridge. They've developed a system that can transform plastic waste and greenhouse gases into sustainable fuels and other valuable products just using energy from the sun. What? That's right, they can convert 2 waste streams. We know plastic is a huge problem, to say the least, but also we need plastic, right? And so they can convert the waste streams into 2 chemical products at the same time, and this is the first time that this has been achieved in a solar-powered reactor. It converts the carbon dioxide and plastics into different products, useful ones in a range of industries. For example, CO2 converted into what's called syngas. It's a key building block for sustainable liquid fuels. Plastic bottles converted into glycolic acid, widely used in the cosmetics industry. They're changing the type of catalyst used in the reactor, and it's been a game changer when it comes to sustainable product development. So because they're converting plastics and greenhouse gases, literally two of the biggest threats facing the natural world, into useful and valuable products using solar energy. You can read more about it in the journal Nature Synthesis. Today, we celebrate the researchers at the University of Cambridge for being on the Leading Edge, presented by our friends at Leading Edge Physiotherapy. Life shouldn't hurt. Isn't that great, a story like that?
Those are the stories I like, Ryan. You know that.
They're taking CO2, they're taking plastic, they're combining them, and then using energy from the sun, sustainable, perpetual energy from the sun.
Love it.
They're helping save the planet by developing sustainable fuels. So cool. Every Tuesday, you can catch another episode of The Leading Edge, presented by Leading Edge Physiotherapy. On tomorrow's show, we mentioned it already, the federal tourism minister, Randy Boissonnault, will return to Real Talk. We're going to talk about that Moraine Lake Road scenario. We'll talk about the provincial government in Alberta and the feds butting heads on that file. And we're going to talk bigger picture about the just transition. And Dr. Sylvain Charlebois will join us, the food professor, on grocery prices and who's to blame. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human resources Lena Shepard. Website design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.